Jenna Rivera had always believed that loving something too much was a recipe for heartbreak. 3 years had passed since she'd lost Bruno, her golden retriever who'd been her constant companion through college and her first job. The pain of watching him fade away from cancer had left her with a firm resolution. No more pets, no more attachments, no more sleepless nights, worrying about another creature's well-being. Working as a veterinary assistant at Riverside Animal Hospital meant she was surrounded by animals every day, which was both a blessing and a curse. She could channel her love for animals into helping them heal without the emotional investment of ownership. It was the perfect arrangement, or so she told herself every time she went home to her quiet, pet-free apartment. That Tuesday evening started like any other. The October sky had been threatening rain all day, and by 6 o'clock, the first drops were beginning to fall as Jenna locked up the clinic. Dr. Williams had left early for a family dinner, and she'd stayed behind to finish updating patient records. The parking lot was nearly empty, except for her small Honda Civic sitting under the lone streetlight that flickered intermittently. As she hurried toward her car, keys jingling in her hand, the gentle raindrops suddenly transformed into a torrential downpour. Thunder rumbled overhead, and lightning illuminated the dark clouds that seemed to have appeared out of nowhere. Jenna broke into a run, her scrubs getting soaked within seconds. That's when she heard a sound so faint she almost missed it over the noise of the storm. A tiny, desperate crying that seemed to be coming from near the dumpster behind the clinic. Jenna paused, rain streaming down her face, listening intently. There it was again, a weak mewing that tugged at something deep in her chest. Against every logical thought in her head, Jenna changed direction and walked toward the sound. Behind the large green dumpster, huddled against the brick wall of the building, was the smallest kitten she'd ever seen. It couldn't have been more than 6 weeks old, its gray and white fur matted and soaked, its tiny body shivering violently. "Oh, sweetheart," Jenna whispered, crouching down slowly so as not to frighten the little creature. The kitten looked up at her with enormous blue eyes that seemed far too large for its delicate face. Those eyes held a mixture of fear and desperate hope that made Jenna's heart skip a beat. The moment Jenna reached out and gently scooped the kitten into her hands, something extraordinary happened. The tiny body that had been rigid with fear and cold suddenly went completely limp. Not the limpness of unconsciousness, but the complete relaxation of absolute trust. The kitten melted into her palms, like it had been waiting its entire short life for this exact moment. And then came the purring. Jenna had heard thousands of cats purr in her years at the veterinary clinic, but this was different. Despite being cold, wet, and probably hungry, this tiny kitten began purring with an intensity that seemed impossible for something so small. The vibrations traveled through Jenna's hands, up her arms, and somehow reached directly into her chest. It was as if the kitten was saying thank you with its entire being. "I can't," Jenna whispered to herself, even as she tucked the kitten inside her jacket to shield it from the rain. "I can't do this again." But even as she said the words, she was already walking toward her car, the warm bundle of fur pressed against her heart, purring so loudly she could feel it through her ribs. During the short drive home, the kitten never stopped purring. It had positioned itself against Jenna's chest, and every time she glanced down, its blue eyes were looking up at her with such complete adoration and trust that she felt something inside her chest crack open, something she'd kept carefully locked away for 3 years. By the time she reached her apartment building, Jenna had already mentally named the kitten Whisper, inspired by the soft sounds it made between purrs. She told herself this was temporary, just until the storm passed and she could find the kitten a proper home. But as she climbed the 3 flights of stairs to her apartment, feeling the tiny heartbeat against her chest and listening to that incredible purring, Jenna suspected her carefully constructed walls were already beginning to crumble. Marcus Thompson had been living with chronic shoulder pain for 2 years, ever since a rock climbing accident had torn his rotator cuff and ended his dreams of competing professionally. As a physical therapist, he understood his injury better than most patients, which somehow made it worse. He knew exactly which movements would trigger the sharp, stabbing pain that radiated down his arm, and he knew that despite months of his own therapy, something wasn't healing properly. Living in the apartment next to Janice meant he often heard her coming and going at odd hours due to her work at the veterinary clinic. They'd exchanged polite hellos in the hallway and had borrowed sugar from each other a few times. So when he heard what sounded like a cat meowing through the thin walls on Wednesday morning, he was surprised. Jenna had mentioned once that she didn't have pets. Later that evening, Marcus was struggling to reach something on his top shelf when he heard a soft knock on his door. Jenna stood there holding a small gray and white kitten, looking slightly embarrassed. "I'm sorry to bother you," she said, shifting the kitten to one arm. "But Whisper here seems really interested in your apartment. She keeps staring at your door and trying to get out whenever I open mine. I thought maybe you'd like to meet her." Marcus looked down at the kitten, who was indeed staring at him with the most intense blue eyes he'd ever seen. "Whisper, I found her in the storm last night. I'm just keeping her temporarily until I can find her a home." Jenna's voice carried a note of uncertainty, as if she wasn't entirely convinced of her own words. "She's beautiful," Marcus said, reaching out to pet the kitten's head. The moment his fingers made contact with her soft fur, Whisper did something unexpected. She reached out with both tiny paws and gently touched his shoulder, the exact spot where his injury ached constantly. While Jenna laughed nervously. "She's very affectionate. Maybe too affectionate. She does this thing where she just melts into you the moment you pick her up." "Can I?" Marcus asked, gesturing toward the kitten, when Jenna transferred Whisper to Marcus's arms. The kitten immediately pressed herself against his injured shoulder and began purring. But this wasn't ordinary purring. It was a deep, rhythmic vibration that seemed to penetrate right through his shirt and into his muscles. Marcus felt his eyes widen in surprise. That's incredible," he murmured. Within seconds, the constant ache in his shoulder began to lessen. The tension he'd been carrying for months seemed to melt away under the kitten's warm, vibrating body. Jenna noticed his expression change. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. It's just ... Marcus shifted Whisper slightly, and she immediately adjusted her position to maintain contact with his shoulder. "The pain in my shoulder, it's actually getting better. I know this sounds crazy, but I can feel her purring working on the knots in my muscles." For the next 20 minutes, they sat in Marcus's living room while Whisper continued her healing session. Jenna watched in fascination as the lines of stress around Marcus's eyes gradually disappeared. He rolled his shoulder experimentally, something he hadn't been able to do without wincing in months. "This is impossible," he said, but his voice was filled with wonder rather than disbelief. "I haven't felt this good in 2 years. What kind of cat is she?" "Just a stray as far as I know." Jenna was studying Whisper with new interest. "But she did something similar with me last night. When I was upset about finding her in the storm, she seemed to know exactly how to comfort me." Marcus gently stroked Whisper's fur, marveling at how she continued to position herself precisely where his pain had been worst. "You know, there's actually scientific research about cat purring having therapeutic effects. The frequency of their purrs, usually between 20 and 50 hertz, has been shown to promote bone healing, reduce pain, and lower blood pressure." "Really? Really?" Some hospitals are even studying purr therapy as a complementary treatment. Looked down at Whisper, who had closed her eyes but continued her steady, powerful purring. "But I've never experienced anything like this. It's like she knows exactly where to focus her energy." That night, Jenna lay in bed with Whisper curled against her chest, thinking about what had happened with Marcus. The kitten's behavior wasn't random. There was intention behind it, almost like Whisper could sense pain and was drawn to heal it. As the purring vibrations lulled her to sleep, Jenna wondered if she'd found something much more special than just a stray cat. The next morning, Marcus knocked on her door with a request that would change everything. "I know this might sound strange," he said, "but would it be possible for me to spend some time with Whisper each day? Just for a little while? I slept better last night than I have in years." Jenna looked at the hope in his eyes and realized that Whisper wasn't just healing her own guarded heart. She was about to heal an entire community. Mrs. Beatrice Wong had been sitting in her armchair for 3 hours, staring at the framed photograph of her late husband, when she heard the soft scratching at her door. It was Thursday afternoon, exactly 1 week since Henry's funeral, and She'd barely eaten or spoken to anyone since the service. The scratching came again, more insistent this time, followed by a gentle mewing sound. Beatrice had lived in apartment-to-be for 15 years, and in all that time, she'd never heard a cat. In the hallway, the building had strict no-pet policies, enforced by their notoriously rigid landlord, Mr. Peterson. But there it was again, evidently a cat, and it sounded young when she finally opened the door. Expecting to shoo away a stray, she found the most beautiful little kitten sitting patiently in the hallway. The gray and white creature looked up at her with enormous blue eyes and immediately walked into her apartment as if she'd been invited. "Oh my," Beatrice whispered, closing the door behind the small intruder. "Where did you come from, little one?" the kitten whispered. Though Beatrice didn't know her name, yet walked directly to Henry's favorite recliner and jumped up onto the worn leather seat. She settled into the exact spot where Henry used to rest his hand while watching the evening news, and began purring. Beatrice felt her knees go weak. She sank onto the sofa across from the chair, tears streaming down her face for the first time. "Since the funeral, you can't be here," she whispered to the kitten. "Henry's not. He's not coming back." But Whisper seemed to understand something that went beyond words. She jumped down from the recliner and padded over to Beatrice, climbing onto her lap with the kind of confidence that suggested she knew exactly where she belonged. The moment Whisper settled against Beatrice's chest, something extraordinary happened. The purring that emerged from such a small creature was unlike anything Beatrice had ever heard. It seemed to fill the entire room, reaching into all the corners, where loneliness had been hiding. The vibrations traveled through her body, and for the first time in weeks, Beatrice felt some of the crushing weight in her chest begin to lift. "How did you know?" she asked the kitten through her tears. "How did you know I needed this?" Whisper pressed her small head against Beatrice's cheek and continued her healing purr. They sat together as the afternoon sun streamed through the windows, the old woman finally allowing herself to grieve properly, while this mysterious little creature absorbed her pain and transformed it into something bearable. An hour later, there was a knock at the door. Beatrice opened it to find a young woman with kind eyes looking worried. "I'm so sorry," Jenna said immediately. "This is Whisper. She's my foster kitten, and she somehow got out. Hope she didn't cause any trouble." "Foster kitten?" Beatrice looked down at Whisper, who was now purring against her ankle. "I'm Jenna, from 3A. I found her a few days ago, and I'm trying to find her a permanent home." Jenna paused, studying Beatrice's face. "Has she been here long?" "Just an hour or so, but ... Beatrice hesitated, then decided to be honest. "My husband passed away last week, and I've been having a very difficult time. Somehow, this little one seemed to know exactly what I needed." Jenna's expression softened with understanding. "She has a gift for that. My neighbor Marcus says the same thing, that she seems to know where people hurt and how to help." Over the next few days, Whisper began making regular visits to Beatrice's apartment. Jenna had given her a spare key, so Whisper could come and go as needed, and somehow the kitten had worked out a schedule. Mornings with Jenna, afternoons with Marcus for his shoulder therapy, and evenings with Beatrice for what she'd started, calling heart healing sessions. Word spread quietly through the building. Mrs. Rodriguez on the first floor mentioned to her friend that she'd seen the sweetest kitten in the hallway. The college students in 3B started leaving their door open, hoping to catch a glimpse of the mysterious healing cat. Even cranky Mr. Peterson's assistant mentioned hearing about a special kitten that was helping residents with various ailments, but it was 9-year-old Timmy Foster, who had put Whisper's abilities to the ultimate test. Timmy lived with his grandmother in 4A and suffered from severe anxiety that made school and social situations nearly impossible. His grandmother had been trying different treatments for months. Nothing seemed to help her shy, frightened grandson. None of them knew that Whisper's greatest challenge was about to walk through their lives, that a scared little boy and a healing kitten were about to teach an entire community what it meant to truly care for one another. Timmy Foster had been having nightmares about fire alarms ever since the safety drill at school had triggered his worst panic attack yet. The loud, piercing sound seemed to reach into his chest and squeeze all the air out of his lungs. His grandmother, Helena, had tried everything: therapy, breathing exercises, even noise-canceling headphones, but nothing helped when those alarms went off. It was a Friday afternoon when the building's ancient fire alarm system malfunctioned, sending ear-splitting sirens echoing through every hallway. Timmy was in his bedroom doing homework when the sound hit him like a physical blow. His breathing became shallow and rapid, his hands started shaking, and the familiar feeling of drowning in his own fear took over completely. Helena rushed to his room, but Timmy was already curled up in his closet, hyperventilating and unable to respond to her voice. She'd seen these episodes before, and knew that sometimes they could last for hours. She was reaching for her phone to call his doctor when she heard something impossible over the noise of the alarm dash purring. The whisper had somehow gotten into their apartment. Helena was certain the door had been closed. The small kitten walked directly to Timmy's closet and squeezed herself into the small space beside the terrified boy. Without hesitation, she pressed her tiny body against his chest and began the most intense purring Helena had ever heard. "Timmy, honey, there's a kitten here," Helena said gently, crouching by the closet door. "Can you feel her purring?" Timmy's eyes were squeezed shut, but Helena could see his breathing starting to change. Whisper had positioned herself so that her vibrations were traveling directly into Timmy's ribcage. And somehow her steady, rhythmic purring was beginning to match and slow his panicked heartbeat. The fire alarm continued wailing, but Whisper never flinched. She stayed pressed against Timmy's chest, purring with such determination that it seemed like she was trying to purr the fear right out of his body. Gradually, Timmy's shoulders began to relax. His breathing slowed. His hands stopped shaking. "She's helping me, Grandma," Timmy whispered, opening his eyes for the first time since the alarm started. "I can feel the scared feelings going away." Lana watched in amazement as her grandson, who usually took hours to recover from these episodes, slowly emerged from the closet with Whisper still clutched against his chest. The kitten continued her healing purr even as Timmy sat down on his bed, looking calmer than he'd been in months. When the fire department finally turned off the malfunctioning alarm, Timmy was sitting cross-legged on his bedroom floor, gently petting Whisper and telling her about his favorite video games. Helena had never seen him recover from a panic attack so quickly. "Where did she come from?" Timmy asked, looking up at his grandmother with wonder. Before Helena could answer, there was a frantic knocking at their door. Looking worried and slightly out of breath, "I'm so sorry," Jenna began immediately. Whisper got out again during the alarm. "I've been looking everywhere." She stopped when she saw Timmy holding the kitten. "Oh, she found you. She saved me," Timmy said simply. "When the loud noise made me scared, she made the scared feelings go away with her purring." Helena looked at Jenna with tears in her eyes. I don't know how she knew, but she got to Timmy right when he needed help most. She somehow got through our locked door and went straight to him. Jenna sat down on the floor next to Timmy, watching Whisper continue to purr against the boy's chest. "She seems to have a gift for finding people who need healing. Can she come back?" Timmy asked, looking between Jenna and his grandmother. "Please, I think she likes me, and I promise I'll take really good care of her." That's when Helena noticed. They weren't alone in the hallway. Marcus stood in the doorway, his shoulder pain clearly absent as he moved freely for the first time in months. Beatrice was there too, looking more alive than she had since her husband's funeral. Even some of the other neighbors had gathered, drawn by the story of the kitten, who had somehow known exactly where she was needed most. But their quiet moment was interrupted by heavy footsteps on the stairs. Mr. Peterson, the building's stern landlord, appeared at the top of the staircase, his face red with anger. "I've been getting reports about an unauthorized pet in this building," he announced loudly. "Whoever is harboring this animal has 24 hours to remove it, or I'll be forced to begin eviction proceedings." The hallway fell silent. Jenna felt her heart sink as she realized that Whisper's healing journey might be coming to an end. But as she looked around at the faces of her neighbors, Marcus standing pain-free, Beatrice with light back in her eyes, Timmy calm and smiling, she knew this was about to become a fight worth having. Dr. Rebecca Martinez had seen many unusual cases in her 15 years as an animal behaviorist, but the phone call from Jenna Rivera was unlike anything she'd encountered. A kitten with apparent healing abilities, therapeutic purring that could stop panic attacks. It sounded like wishful thinking. but the desperation in Jenna's voice convinced her to make the drive across town to see this remarkable cat for herself. The apartment building was in chaos when Dr. Martinez arrived Saturday morning. Residents filled the lobby, while talking at once about their experiences with Whisper and their determination to fight the eviction. Notice Mr. Peterson had posted on every door. Jenna met her at the entrance, looking exhausted but determined. "Thank you for coming," Jenna said, leading Dr. Martinez upstairs. "I know it sounds impossible, but Whisper really does have some kind of gift. She's helped so many people in just 1 week." Dr. Martinez had brought her equipment cameras, audio recorders, and instruments to measure the frequency of Whisper's purring. She'd also brought a healthy dose of scientific skepticism. Extraordinary claims required extraordinary evidence. But the moment she met Whisper, her skepticism began to waver. The kitten looked at her with those remarkable blue eyes and immediately walked over to her laptop bag, where Dr. Martinez had been carrying medication for her own chronic migraines. Whisper sat directly on top of the bag and began purring with such intensity that the vibrations were clearly audible across the room. "How could she possibly know about my headaches?" Dr. Martinez murmured, pulling out her frequency analyzer.
"Ow!"
No one mentioned them. The readings on her equipment were extraordinary. Whisper's purring registered at exactly 25 Hz, the optimal frequency for reducing pain and promoting healing. But more remarkably, the kitten seemed able to adjust her frequency slightly for different types of discomfort. Over the next several hours, Dr. Martinez observed Whisper interact with various residents. With Marcus, the purring was deeper, more focused on his shoulder. With Beatrice, it was gentler, more rhythmic, almost like a heartbeat. With Timmy, it was steady and calming, perfectly synchronized to slow and anxious breathing pattern. "This is unprecedented, Doctor," Martinez told the gathered residents. "Cats do purr for healing their own healing, primarily. But Whisper seems to have evolved this ability specifically to heal others. She's reading your physiological signals, stress, hormones, heart rate, muscle tension, and responding with precisely the frequency needed to provide relief." Mr. Peterson arrived just as Dr. Martinez was packing up her equipment. He stood in Jenna's doorway, arms crossed, clearly unmoved by the crowd of residents defending their healing kitten. "I don't care if this cat can perform miracles," he announced. "The lease clearly states no pets, and I won't make exceptions." That's when Dr. Martinez stepped forward. "Actually, Mr. Peterson, under the Americans with Disabilities Act, therapeutic animals can be exempted from no-pet policies. And based on my evaluation, Whisper demonstrates clear therapeutic benefits for multiple residents with documented medical conditions." She pulled out her phone and showed him official documentation she'd been preparing. "I'm recommending that Whisper be registered as a therapy animal for this building. The healing benefits she provides could qualify several of these residents for therapeutic animal accommodations." Mr. Peterson's stern expression began to waver as Dr. Martinez explained the legal implications. Discriminating against residents who needed therapeutic animals could result in significant lawsuits and fines. Furthermore, Dr. Martinez continued, "I'd like to propose a partnership. My research foundation has been looking for a location to study therapeutic human-animal relationships. We could provide funding for building improvements in exchange for the right to study Whisper's abilities. This building could become a landmark case in animal-assisted healing." Jenna watched in amazement as her neighbors rallied around not just Whisper, but around each other. Helena offered to help coordinate visiting schedules so Whisper could continue helping everyone who needed her. Marcus volunteered to document the physical therapy benefits for the research study. Beatrice suggested they start a building newsletter to share stories of Whisper's healing work. That evening, as the excitement died down and the residents returned to their apartments, Jenna sat on her couch with Whisper purring contentedly against her chest. The temporary foster situation had evolved into something she'd never expected, a permanent home filled with purpose and community. "You knew all along, didn't you?" Jenna whispered to Whisper, who responded with an extra loud purr. "You knew that healing me was just the beginning." Through her window, Jenna could see lights in the apartments around her, Marcus doing pain-free shoulder exercises, Beatrice reading in Henry's chair with a peaceful expression, Timmy playing quietly in his room without fear. Whisper had done more than heal individual hurts. Oh, she'd healed an entire community by teaching them to care for one another. As Jenna fell asleep that night, Whisper's healing vibrating against her heart, she realized that sometimes the best homes aren't just places where you're loved, they're places where you can love others. And Whisper had given them all the greatest gift of all, the knowledge that healing, like love, grows stronger when it's shared.